I'll sit on this side so you don't get any inclinations.
God. Whatever you want, man.
That's right. I remember.
I'm completely in control of my inclinations.
Yeah. As the hours dwindle, the fast.
Correct. No, you're 100% right. I couldn't even say that with a straight face.
It's okay.
Or even a wry, curious face. Hear me now, say Shana Tova. No, that's not working. Hey, Eric. Look who's here. Hey, buddy. How you doing?
What's up? Shana Tova. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Woo.
All right. That was not a rhetorical question.
Good.
I'm actually hoping that I can be heard. Can I be heard? Say yes. Yes. Thank you. Wow. A moment of affirmation for the rabbi. Actually, the whole afternoon is a time of affirmation for me and for our entire congregation. So I am so happy and so proud that I am sitting with these three remarkable young people, all of whom are connected to and have grown up in our congregation. And it is my absolute privilege to be able to introduce them. And I'll let everybody know how things are going to proceed. So we have about an hour together. So I'm going to take off my watch. I'm going to put it right here. And hopefully I'll look at it and make sure that things move along. So the format is as follows. I'm going to do some introductions, And then we're going to have a conversation. We've planned a little bit of what it is that we're going to share around issues having to do with Jewish identity, having to do with Israel, having to do with how an entire generation, though we cannot generalize, but more or less some things that can be said about how a younger emerging generation are facing their Jewish commitments and their commitments to the Jewish state. And then we're hoping that we'll be able to leave time at the end for all of you, fine members of our community, to be able to ask some of your own questions. So the first thing that I'm going to do is to introduce our distinguished panelists for the Jack Stein Memorial Yom Kippur Symposium. So all the way over to my left, we have Jonah Klempner. Give it up for Jonah. So these are brief introductions. Much more can be said about each of these distinguished individuals. Jonah is currently at Georgetown Law School. He studied the... Jonah graduated from Georgetown Law School. Okay. By the way, I'm glad this is a shy crowd. If I get anything else wrong, please don't hesitate to correct me. So he studied at Binghamton University. He has studied the Israeli-Palestinian Binghamton. Thank you. He grew up in Great Neck. Can I hear it for Great Neck? Okay. Anyway, so Jonah studied the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and he also recently led a trip to Israel for students from Georgetown of all religious backgrounds, and that was very interesting, and I believe we'll be hearing a little bit more about that later. He is the son of Rochelle and Ron Klempner. We also want to say Mazal Tov to grandmother Phyllis, who is here, and he is engaged to Brittany, who is sitting in the front row, and we are delighted that she is here as well, and they actually got engaged on one of the trips to Israel, this trip that I referred to. So that's Jonah. Moving on, we have Zachary Leventhal. Give it up for Zachary. So Zachary graduated from Tulane. He was very involved there with Chabad and with other efforts towards Jewish identity on campus. He himself led a Taglit Birthright trip to Israel, and he served as a paratrooper combat sergeant and squad leader in the IDF. Monica Emrani Horowitz. Oh, Zachary, want to wish and acknowledge his parents, Nancy and Michael, who are here. Thank you. And Monica Emrani Horowitz, who grew up here and attended NYU, correct?
Yes.
She attended New York University, and she has been involved as a volunteer for Friends of the IDF, serving as president of the FIDF Young Leadership Tri-State Division, and she is involved in coordinating events that bring together her peers in support of FIDF and in support of Israel. She is the daughter of Roya and David Emrani, who are here, and we also want to acknowledge her husband, Adam Horowitz, who is here together with his family and the entire Emrani family. So those are the introductions, and we are delighted to have these panelists here. So let's jump right in. So the first thing that I'm going to ask each of you to reflect on. So you are remarkably involved as young people in issues that pertain to the Jewish community. You are also involved in support of the state of Israel. And I want to ask each of you to reflect on something about your involvement that has filled you with a sense of pride, with a sense of optimism about our people, about the state of Israel, and something that you experienced, a story, a circumstance that has filled you with some fear or some frustration. So starting with the positive, but then also something that you are struggling with as a result of your involvement. So I am going to flip an imaginary coin, and we're going to start with Jonah.
Gmar Chatima Tova, everyone.
Jonah Klempner.
Let's see, proud and frustrated. Those are strong emotions. I think both my most proud moment and my most frustrated moment came on the same trip that I went on. Now, I was pretty emotional. I was falling in love on this trip. This was 4 years ago. I was a first-year law student at Georgetown, and I lived with this 45-year-old Nkosi Nati Mikiwansi, a father of two, who became a lawyer during apartheid in South Africa. And every night he would tell me about that. And I wanted to hear about his experience because I knew that this was an interfaith trip and I didn't know who I would face. And I wanted to be prepared to combat allegations that were running around, comparisons between the two situations. Because I adamantly opposed that characterization, and I really was learning from his experiences, which made
Put
me,
the mic a little closer. Yeah, just so everyone can hear.
which made me all the more frustrated when 5 days into this trip, I went to a community. I'm not going to say which one because I'm going to speak poorly of it. It's Yom Kippur, that would be bad. But it was an unlicensed settlement in the West Bank and unlicensed by the state. And there was a panel, hopefully unlike this one, of 3 members of the community who had moved from South Africa after apartheid ended to their current place where they were residing. And it became increasingly clear throughout the panel that they had moved because they felt like they had lost the battle there in the 90s and that they were trying to wage a similar battle here. And hearing them try to justify their racist, supremacist ideology with Judaism and Jewish values was the most frustrated I had ever been. Seeing it along with this group of people who had, non-Jews who had never seen Israel, who could take what they were saying and extrapolate it, I was incredibly frustrated. Thankfully, though, the group that I was with also saw what I was most proud of a few days before that, when we went to the Shimon Peres Center of Innovation and Peace. And I don't know if anyone's been to the Shimon Peres Center of Innovation and Peace, but this place shows the greatest inventions of the Jewish people. It talks about Simcha glass and desalinization technology, drip irrigation technology. It talks about the Iron Dome and all of the things that we have invented, that we have shared with the world, saving millions of lives and helping people throughout, that Zionism and the strength and resilience of the Jewish people has led to. And sharing that with my group was the most proud I've ever been in Israel and the Jewish people. And then connecting that, as Shimon Peres did, to the idea that innovation and sharing those ideals leads to peace and shalom throughout the world. There was no moment where I felt more pride. Wow. So I'm really glad that they got to see that.
Right. No, Jonah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that is remarkable. Same trip, several days apart, and you had an experience of Jewish people speaking in ways that you found to be frankly racist, and you also had experience of the ways that Judaism can be a symbol of and inspiring innovation and connection and the best type of elevation. Can I just ask you as a follow-up, how did you process both the highs and the lows with this group that, first of all, what was your role in this group? Just make that clear for everybody.
This was my first trip. I was a first-year student. I later led the trip. This time I was just a participant, along enjoying the ride, falling in love.
Okay. So you were occupied in a variety of ways during the course of this first trip. but you were not leading the trip, and so you might not have had quite the same latitude to help navigate responses. But do you remember, were there reactions and were you part of the conversations, both about the highs and also about the lows for this mixed trip as you described and experienced it?
Absolutely. One of the beauties of trips like this is everybody kind of breaks down into small circles and reflects, and this happens on all the birthright trips where you learn when you're a birthright leader. I actually did a fellowship to become a birthright leader, and this is one of the biggest things that they tell you in the trainings, that you're going to hear a lot. And when I led the trip, the students told me that they learned more in the week that they were there than they learned in a semester at Georgetown. It is intensive.
Yeah.
And so when you hear these things, you really need to take a moment to process and break them down. And even though I was, a first-year law student, I still had some experience. I'd lived in Jerusalem for a while, and so I was able, and I was Jewish, of course, so I was able to bring some perspective to that conversation after that.
Right.
That I think was really impactful to all of these students who now, one of the most interesting things about this organization, iTrek, that sponsors, they give $2,000 for all of these future successful students in top business schools, law schools, medical schools, to come to Israel, is that they now have a connection with Israel. And they'll have that throughout their lives. And they have it from a point where they might not have had as much money as they're going to have in the future, which is a really creative organization that led to a really phenomenal trip. And I'm really glad I got to be a part of it and then lead it in the future.
Right, that's phenomenal. And for these people to have that kind of an impactful experience, it's definitely going to last a lifetime for them. Monica, let's jump to you. So share with us the high and the low, the moments of pride and the aspect of frustration that you experienced.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me. I feel like this is kind of a press conference.
Without the pressure.
Yeah, so two stories. I'll start with the frustration. So we had traveled to Israel for one of our cousins, actually with several cousins, bar bat mitzvahs, and we celebrated as a family at the Kotel, but on the section where families can celebrate together, men and women together. And we were singing as a group, joyously, and there was a group of men, more religious, that were, started to sing very loudly, and we're like, oh, great, they're celebrating with us. And we slowly started to realize that they just weren't supportive of women praying and singing at the Kotel. And within my family, we were always raised that women and men are equal and that we have every right to be leaders and be part of the Jewish community. And so, rather than get angry, what we did is we got in a circle, all the women, a lot of my cousins were there, and we just started to sing even more loudly and more proudly and with more joy. And,
wow.
That was a point of frustration, obviously, that, as women, it's a continuous struggle to be leaders and feel as equal within the Jewish community at times. But, what made me most proud was that I have so many amazing women and people surrounding us that can help elevate us and really break through that frustration and that, that pushback.
Beautiful. So the pride was part of the same story.
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess there's always that,
Yeah.
that frustration that brings out the pride. But
Sure.
I guess if I were to speak to another proud moment, more so than the frustration, I think a lot of people probably remember the really significant rise in anti-Semitism. I mean, it's always going on, but back in May of 2021, there was a severe uptick in anti-Semitic things going on in the community. And so people started to really post more on social media, just bringing light to everything going on. And there was a lot of attacks on social media going on People were getting attacked in their DMs about their support for Israel. But going back to the proud part, being part of the FIDF board, we have this amazing group chat that we kept sending in all of the DMs that said, well, you know, they brought up some weird fact around Palestine, you know, its sequence of ownership. And we had a whole community of people within that WhatsApp chat that said, well, here's a resource that you can read about and you can educate this other person and really start to forge a better bond rather than fight within the DMs, really start to educate the people that aren't as supportive of our stance, but really start to de-escalate the anger that you're seeing via Instagram and via the DMs.
Right. I think it's interesting that both of your proud moments were related to responses to challenges and to frustration, so that it seems that you derived, I think appropriately so, a sense of pride from being able to push back, whether it's by, you know, singing in a way that says, hey, we women are here at the Kotel, we're not going anywhere, or a way of trying to raise the resolution on an issue that was becoming a source of controversy on social media. So that's very cool. So last and certainly not least, our former IDF soldier and aspiring all sorts of things.
Hi everyone,
Zachary
Shana Tova,
Levenbach.
Gomer Chatima Tova. So as I'm sitting here and listening to their stories, I'm reflecting on my own life, and I think back, so about 2 years ago on Yom Kippur, my Yom Kippur looked much different than how it looks in front of me now. I was fasting, and I was just starting as a combat soldier in the IDF, and I was put on guard duty. And my shift was just at the time when the sun was setting, so for last night, and I was alone in an area outside of the West Bank, and we were all spread out in different areas, and there was a car driving around, and I'm thinking to myself, like, you know, I just volunteered to the army, nothing's gonna happen to me, like, God is gonna protect me, like, he knows I'm a good boy, like, everything's gonna be okay. And I'm like, also I'm fasting, I'm doing a great job, all's gonna go be smooth. And I remember there was a car driving around in circles, and they started driving faster and like making like these sprint rushes in front of me. And at one point I thought to myself, like, I don't know what this is, I should be smart and stop the car. And I stopped this car, and these guys started making jokes about Yom Kippur, and they were smiling and getting excited, and I just felt something was off. So I remember I asked them to get out of the car, and at this time I start like asking for someone to come. I wanted an officer, because I'm only at this point a few months in, I'm like, I wanted an officer to come and join me. And my walkie-talkie wasn't working. And I'm in the middle of, I'm right outside of the West Bank border, and they could smell the fear on you so easily, and you have to just pretend that you're strong and everything's cool, and because if not, you're the only thing between them and a headline that something happens to an IDF soldier. I remember I got them out of the car, I found 2 knives, no one would respond on the radio, and it's dark, it's really dark out. And I'm fasting, and I have a headache the way I have one right now, and I'm sure all of you do too. And I just took the knives, I put them in the trunk, and I told them to leave. And 5 minutes later, my officer drove by just to check up on me, and I'm like, I wish you were here 5 minutes before, things would have been smoother. So I'm here because of my, I guess, 2 accomplishments, one being a soldier in the IDF as a paratrooper, and more recently, I was a tour coordinator and tour leader for Birthright. I brought 3 buses of 120 recently graduated Tulane students, which is where myself and my brother went to university. If you know anything about Tulane, it's an amazing school, and they work hard and they play hard. So these kids were, so I'm gonna talk about what made me proud with them, and also something that frustrated me too. So of these guys that I brought on the trip, there's 120 of them. Many of them had no idea what Shabbat was. They had no idea what Challah was, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And this is just what they grew up in. This is what their lives looked like, and it's not their fault at all. And if, as Jonah explained on Birthright, in the beginning, you have just so much information is constantly thrown at you, and we're doing 18-hour days, and they're learning so much. And I remember these, like, you know, the guys who would usually be known as like the cool guys of the group, like after a day or 2 days would come walk up to me and walk up to the rabbi on the trip and ask me questions like, you know, why do we keep Shabbat? How do I keep kosher? What are some ways for me to bring what I'm learning here today back home? And then as the days went on, the questions became deeper. There was like, this is where it gets really proud. It's, you know, can I go and learn more about Judaism? Can I come and spend a year in Israel? Because I spent half a year in Israel as a semester studying abroad at Tel Aviv University. So they heard about this and they're like, well, I just graduated, so I can't do this, but can I spend time in Israel? So the questions progressed, can I spend time in Israel? And then towards really later on, we went to the cemetery in Jerusalem where there's a soldier buried named Michael Levine, and he was a lone soldier just like myself, like a paratrooper, and he passed away during one of the Lebanon wars. And I sat there with with 100 kids in front of me, all squished together between the graves, and I sat down and I explained to them my entire story about what brought me to the IDF, what brought me to getting here today, and what my relationship and similarities were to Michael Levine. But how we both had to fight our way into the IDF. We both had to fight our way into the paratroopers, and thank God I'm still alive and I'm sitting here today, but things could have easily gone a very different direction for me the way they were for him. And when I was explaining the story to them, you have like the toughest boys and the coolest girls sitting there crying their faces out, hearing my story. And you just see how real this is, how real Israel is, how real the IDF is. And these guys that didn't even know about anything to do with Israel a week before are so connected. So then after that, the questions became, how do I join the IDF? How do I draft into the IDF? And if any of you know me, I meet with many different New York young adults that are planning to draft to the IDF. I usually say that after 4 hours of sitting with me, you know if you're going to go or you're going to not go to the IDF. So far, everyone's gone that I've spoken with, which is great. And I hope I can, inspire those to do this, especially if it's meant for them. I have so many proud moments I could talk about with Israel. I mean, me and my entire unit, after a 40-kilometer march, standing at Ammunition Hill, 16 hours of just marching, and everyone's bloody and muddy and disgusting, and they play Hatikva, and all the moms in the stands are crying, and you just see like your commanders and soldiers crying. This is at the culmination at the end of the paratroopers course. This is what we do to become an official paratrooper, and you get a red beret, which is a huge deal in Israel, and to myself and my family now too. That's a proud moment. I'll switch it over to the frustration. I'm sure, who here has been to Israel? Please raise your hand. And so when you've been to Israel, I'm sure there's always a moment where you feel like this amazing, amazing height, this amazing moment where, wow, I can see myself living here, or wow, I can see myself doing X, Y, Z, or I'm going to return and I'm going to follow through. I've had these moments. I'm sure you've had these moments too, when something that Moji Pomerati says, which is amazing, and I always keep this, and I always repeat this, is that one day in Israel is a month in the real world. So much happens in a day in Israel, you just see so many blessings. And it says in the Torah, like, Hashem's, God's hand is felt and seen more in Israel. So it's a very spiritual and holy place. What frustrates me, firsthand, seeing my fellow soldiers in the IDF that were also volunteer, my birthright participants that I led to Israel, and just friends and family around, is that loss of that spark. You get to Israel and you can feel this spark. Every time I get to Israel, I feel something different. I kiss the ground at Ben Gurion Airport. People look at me like I'm crazy. But you feel this spark, and then when you come back to your life in America or wherever you come from, you don't feel it the same way. And everything that, if you took that spark and ran with it, it could have gone somewhere great. For me, I took that spark after many trips to Israel, and I ran with it, and it took me to the IDF. And it kills me inside to see what people could have done with their sparks. And That's the frustrating part, because you had 2-3 months ago kids asking me, how do I get into the IDF? How do I come to Israel? And now they're totally in a different world. And I see them out in New York City at the different clubs and bars, and they're just totally different mindset. So maybe they still have it inside of them, and maybe you guys all do have it inside of you too. And, take every day at a time and continue to love Israel.
Wow.
That's
Wow,
it.
that's beautiful. Thank you, Zach. Ah. So there are a number of different directions that we can go. What I want to do for a few moments is to just invite any one of you who wants to reflect on the following. I think oftentimes adults who are older than you will say about your generation, and I think are you all millennials? Have we determined that?
Gen Z.
Millennials and Gen Z, okay. The older adults who make these comments probably don't know the difference. It's off by 1 year. But anyway, so what is often said is your generation is self-absorbed. Your generation is more concerned about getting ahead than about caring about the people around you. And within the Jewish community, we say your generation isn't joining, your generation doesn't have the commitment to Israel and to the Jewish people that former generations had. And I just want you guys to honestly reflect on that statement. And don't be afraid to offend. It's Yom Kippur. We can all apologize for anything that we say. What is your honest response to that based on who you are and based on your own experience of your peers? Just jump in, anyone who wants to respond to that.
I can start, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I said that I didn't 100% agree with you, right? I think that there is some truth to that. And I think it is frustrating as parents, grandparents, seeing the younger generation kind of lose that connection to the Jewish community. But I think as Jewish leaders, I actually take more responsibility for that. I think it's on us to give people the place and the ways that they can find a way that connects with them in terms of, the way that my parents participated in the community is not the way that I'm going to, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not the way that our community is. And I think, bringing it back to like the professional sphere, probably what you guys have been reading is the millennial generation needs a lot of feedback. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to participating in the Jewish community. I think that there just needs to be some more feedback and some more clear-cut ways for people to get involved, right? So what does that mean for me as president of FIDF? It means that I need to come out with more specific ways that people can get involved. Here's a project that you can fundraise for. Here's an event that you can learn about all the good things that we're doing to support the soldiers. And one thing that we've created from that is we've created this membership program where people can be involved on a deeper level, not just come to our social events or come to this happy hour, come to this white party. Here's a membership program where you're going to be continuously giving a portion of your yearly donation in monthly increments, and you can actually get deeper access to our community, deeper access to the soldiers. And we had a sold out event just last month where you can hear a pin drop during the program, which is not something that we were able to accomplish earlier because we were able to get a concentrated group of young professionals who are really interested in this. So to bring it back, I think it really comes down to the leadership in our community, like the millennial leaders, the Gen Z leaders. Give your communities the opportunity to get more involved, tell them how they can do it, and you'll really be interested and hopefully pleasantly surprised with how they rise to the occasion.
Incredible. Thank you, Monica. Gentlemen, anything you want to add?
I feel like I do agree at some level that the generation is largely self-absorbed, and word for word is largely self-absorbed, right? And less committed to Israel and Judaism than previous generations. But speaking to the older generation in the room, if you remember the generation above you looking down on you, they probably felt the same way. They probably felt, oh, well, my grandparents and my parents were more religious, and everyone went to shul every week or synagogue every week, and everyone was thinking aliyah or thinking whatever they were, and that strength gets diluted. It's the same thing with cultures, and it's the same thing with religion. if it's not going to be brought in a tightly knit group and it's not going to be held together, it's going to slowly, it's going to change shape. I think it is important, as Monica explained, that we do need opportunities for people to get involved. It's not a part of our daily life. If you look at, I remember like what my life looked like when I was a 14-year-old freshman at Great Neck North High School. I would wake up, go to class, go to the library, go to whatever wrestling practice, and go to sleep as quickly as I could. Like that was my day, that was my week. And on Saturday and Sunday, I didn't even have the energy to, other than wrestling matches and whatnot, I didn't have the energy to necessarily go and get involved in things. I would, though, go above and try to. I would go with like my friend Aaron and Eric sitting over there. We would go with Temple, with the youth house, and we went to go to Long Beach to do Hurricane Sandy cleanup. And it's amazing what we did. It's amazing that we did that, but that's not necessarily like we did this, okay, that's it. That's like 1 or 2 days. I think that it's just what society is now, and if you do really want to be involved, you can find ways to be involved, but it's not everyone needs to get up and drop their stuff and go run to Israel like I did and join the IDF. You can do so many more things by being here in Great Neck even. But it's hard. It's a hard conversation to have, and it's a challenge to have because people have their careers, and the same way I explained what my life looked like as a freshman at North, the same thing goes for being a freshman at university, and the same thing is going for being a 26-year-old, 27-year-old going into your professional world, or a 36, 37-year-old starting a family. It's hard to make it work. It's hard to find those times. So obviously, I encourage you to find those ways, but it's very difficult to just put a blanket over this and say we're largely self-absorbed, and because we can just go up the ladder and find that those same challenges.
So I would thank you. That's first of all for opening it up, for taking an honest self-reflection, collective self-reflection. And I just had a thought as both of you were speaking, which is with each passing generation, we're also more connected to the rest of the world. So 3-4 generations ago, people lived in very largely isolated communities, so isolated by religion, by culture, etc. And you guys, by virtue of how you were educated, by virtue of social media, you are living in the entire world in a way that prior generations really did not. So I think that it's important for you to find ways to commit and to connect, which might be different than the way your parents and your grandparents did. And for older generations, instead of looking constantly and criticizing and say, why don't you, to have a conversation about how can you? And that, I think, is a shift in terms of paradigm and mindset that's important. I want to talk now a little bit about really your upbringing and ask each of you just to reflect on some of the inspiration that you received. So in terms of your own commitments, your own connections, your own, we would say in Hebrew, hashkafa, your lens at viewing the world, how are you impacted by family? How are you impacted by this community? And if you are so inclined, also share perhaps a way in which you may have diverged from the way that you were brought up to look at things or to think about things. Is there anything that you might be doing now that's a little bit different? So shall we begin this time with Jonah?
So my first trip to Israel was actually with Rabbi Stecker.
That is
with
true.
My family and with my community. I went to college at my parents' alma mater, and I majored in my mother's major, a Judaic studies major. Why did I do these things? It was because I was president of the youth house. I came right back from that trip and became president of the youth house. The trip is one of the trips that inspired me to live there, to lead trips there. But I think it inspired me to really start down a path in which I found my own ways. I think some of which diverged from my parents. The best thing I think that I learned, or the biggest piece of inspiration that I took from my Judaic studies degree, there's this fantastic Zionist 120 years ago named Yitzhak Epstein, who wrote a piece called The Hidden Question. If you haven't read it,
What's it called again? Just say
The
that.
Hidden Question, and presented it to the Zionist Conference. And he argued that it was our responsibility, that it was a shame that not many of our community members had really learned about that we needed to, if we were going to go and everyone was going to immigrate to Israel, we needed to learn about the people who were going to be our future neighbors. And he said, it is our responsibility to learn their history, their culture, their hopes, their dreams, and their pain and their suffering and their language. And I took that with all of the inspirations I have, the peacemakers, the Madeleine Albright, Dennis Ross, my professors, and I realized that if you're going to sit next to somebody, on a negotiating table, you need to know who they are and what they've been through. And that's why I don't know how my parents felt when I told them that I wanted to get a master's in Arab Studies at the Center of Contemporary Arab Studies. I don't know how they felt when I said that I want to be the first in, I'm sure, my entire heritage to go to Dubai and learn Arabic. Wow. But I can tell you that it was my mother, it was Moji, my community youth house, who inspired me to take that journey that's led me there to learning about both, obviously, my own history and heritage and the heritage of our neighbors.
Right. Wow. So thank you for that, Jonah. I just, I'm going to say we worked together on this trip. We had I just have to reminisce for a moment because there were a number of people who are here who are on that trip. When we got up at 4 o'clock to climb Masada, and we didn't realize that Masada didn't open until later. So we got there early, and we were just kind of like hanging around. And each of the adults who was there had a different issue. I have a bit of fear of heights, so climbing Masada required some support, and other people had other issues. And the teenagers, Jonah was one of them, were so supportive and so mature and so helpful to each of the older adults. So that was actually a moment of extreme pride for me. But I will just say the negotiating table lately has been a source of frustration. But my hope is that one day, if it is your inclination, Jonah, that you will be sitting at that table, because I think you would have a lot to bring, hopefully, to allow both sides to be able to move forward. So thank you for that. And please, who would like to go next? Your upbringing, your inspiration, and where you might have continued perhaps a unique journey.
I'll start
Okay,
or follow up. So I mean, when looking at my personal life and my whole life history, I grew up in Great Neck. I went to Temple Israel Hebrew School. My Mora, my teacher, was Mora Tziona. Every single one of the teachers in Temple Israel's Hebrew school is from Israel. They're Israeli. They're speaking to you in Hebrew. They used to come in and wear IDF shirts, and they would show videos, and that I remember really far back. That started to put little seeds in my brain. And growing up, I have a lot of friends who are Israeli, and I have a lot of friends who are Iranian and Persian who they were kicked out of their homes because of their Judaism, and I never really felt that sat right with me. My best friends in the world are Persian, and it's interesting because growing up in Great Neck. But moving forward, there's a huge glorification of the IDF coming from Great Neck. There's FIDF, and there's all these different IDF programs, and we have friends that have gone, and older kids, and I remember the older guys above me, the guys who were 10 years older than me, 15 years older than me, I looked at them like legends. These guys went and did this. I was like, I got to do this at some point. And that thought fades away, and you grow up, and you get to high school, and you're focused on your AP this and calculus, and getting into the schools, and taking your ACTs with Mr. Carbone and whatnot, and it moves forward. And then around senior year, I was totally checked out from like academics. I already got into Tulane. I knew what I was doing. I didn't really care about, I didn't even bring a backpack to school anymore. Like I was living life. And we went on spring break in senior year, and me and my friends, we went somewhere in like the Caribbean. It was super fun. And then after that, the table shifted. So myself, Moji, and a bunch of others, we went on a trip called March of the Living, which is an incredible opportunity. It's a huge gift. Thank you, Mom, for sending me on that. Where Amy, Mom, Moji, everyone. So it's about 10,000 Jewish students from all over the world. We go to Poland together. We spend 1 week in Poland visiting the Holocaust camps, seeing Auschwitz, seeing Birkenau, seeing everything. And then after that, you spend a week in Israel. And like, there's nothing in the world like that 1 week in Israel after literally taking your head and like looking on the inside of what the ovens inside of Birkenau looks like. There's no feeling, like I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. There's no feeling like being in Israel right after that. And you arrive to Israel, and that's how the trip is properly set up. It's like when you arrive to Israel, it's not like you go to Poland and then it's like come back to JFK and go back to New York. You go to Israel because they're trying to show you that this is our insurance policy. We need to protect this. We need to be here in Israel because with Israel, there will not be another Holocaust. The IDF exists, and we will do everything we can to prevent another massacre of Jews. And if something goes down in America, we can all get on planes and go to Israel. And trust me, Israel's ready to accept all of you. We just got to do a little building first. But
Our insurance policy.
it's 100% our insurance policy, but I do believe it should be more. Moving forward, so after I got back from this trip, March of the Living, I was supposed to graduate from Great Neck North High School a month later, and I started saying to my dad, I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to college, I'm going to Israel. And that conversation didn't really go so far. I didn't have anything to like give. I didn't have an offer. I wasn't saying IDF at this time. I was just saying Israel. I need to be in Israel. So I got hushed down pretty quickly and went to university, went to Tulane, and I had this tefillin bag with me, which was my grandfather's tefillin. And I got to Tulane, and I looked at the rest of my life, and I said to myself, well, I need to know the history behind all these items. And I'm going to Tulane. I'm now a month into Tulane. I've done nothing Jewish, and this is what the beginning of my adult life looks like. I'm not okay with this. I'm not okay with with my life looking like this. So I became very close with our rabbi on campus. He's a Chabad rabbi. He came from Brooklyn. The same year I started, he started. I remember I met him the first time. I'm like, Rabbi, what's up? You're from Brooklyn. You're from Crown Heights. You don't know where you just came. This is Tulane. You should probably get back in your minivan and drive back to Brooklyn. Like, this is not a holy place. Moving forward, he has every year a 2,000 person Shabbat. He has the biggest Shabbat in North America on campus, and he is tripled. Like, he's the number one on campus Chabad rabbi in the United States, which is incredible. So I went to Tulane. I was slowly becoming unhappy with what my life was looking like from a Jewish aspect. And I went through my sophomore year, and I remember halfway through, like once I started my second semester of my sophomore year, I sat down with the rabbi. I'm like, Rabbi, I'm done. I'm going to the IDF. That's it. I can't get this out of my mind. This is what I need to do. There's kids who are exactly my age doing this, and I'm here partying, going to Saints games, and going to Bourbon Street, and having an amazing time in this weather. And he's like, hold on. Finish Tulane. If you finish Tulane, after that, you can go and do whatever you want, but at least finish and get your degree. I said, sounds a little rational. I don't really do rational. I'll give it a try. So that summer, me, Eric, a bunch of our other friends, we went to Israel, and my parents said to my friends before we went to the airport, make sure he goes back to Tulane. So we get to Tulane, we get to Israel, and the conversations start happening. We're in Jerusalem. It was our first night in Jerusalem, and one of the conversations was that if I were to go back to Tulane, I could spend 6 months in Israel doing like a study abroad semester. So I was like, okay, you know what? That's good enough for me. I'm sold. So I continued Tulane. I went abroad. when I was abroad, this wasn't in my brain. I was just living life. And at the end of, when I first came back from my 7 months in Israel, I was all jet lagged. It was the night I came back. I surprised everyone in New York. I said, like, from 52nd Street all the way down to Soho. I went to my parents' office, my friend's house. Everyone was excited to see me. No one saw me for about half a year. It was amazing. And later that night, Eric and I, we took someone's boat out into the ocean, a little bit out into Long Island Sound. It was, looking back, it was a little dangerous. Sorry, Mike and Farnaz.
It's Yom Kippur. It's the best time to say sorry.
My slate is clean now.
In front of 300 people, you just apologize.
So we took a boat out. It was about 3:30 in the morning. The Coast Guard didn't catch us, thank God. And I turned to Eric and I said, like, it's not my life, and these aren't my shoes, and this isn't my body if I don't return to Israel to join the IDF. Like, this isn't going to be me. I will be sick to my stomach living this life. I'll be looking at myself in the mirror, and it's not myself. And that's that. And time went on, and anti-Semitism was, like, I had one more year of Tulane left, and anti-Semitism was increasing. I remember someone drew a swastika on the North Middle School baseball field. Stuff was going on in New York. And I was just getting fed up, and I knew to myself, like, what? I can't just drive around in my Jeep beating up anti-Semites. Like, this isn't a solution to anything. Like, and I knew to myself, like, the best outlet for me would be to join the IDF and to go into this and go 120% and bring back my experience with IDF to inspire others. Hopefully I can give a little bit of light to some of you today and give some inspiration. And that is my lifeline to my commitment to the IDF and to how it got me to where I am today.
Thank you, Zach. All right.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I know, after. We'll talk.
Before Monica answers, does anybody up here have anything else you'd like to apologize for to anybody? Is there any other scores that need to be settled? Monica, please. Floor is yours.
Yeah, so this is kind of something you alluded to. Really, I credit my inspiration to be more involved with this community, with my heritage and my parents and my whole family. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a Persian Jew, very proud. And my parents were born in Iran and were among the 80,000 Jews that used to live there prior to the revolution. And, you know, when 79 hit, the Shah fled. It was no longer a safe place for Jews. So now, I think I was looking up the latest statistics. There's only 8,500 Jews left in Iran. So, you know, huge decrease, largely related to, you know, our insecurity being there. So my parents came here and they established roots in Long Island. And as they grew their business and you know, grew in wealth, they also created the Iranian American Jewish Federation. My father was one of the main founders. And, you know, from there, I was always surrounded by people who were solely committed to really securing the security of Israel and the future of the Jewish community. And I have my earliest memories visiting Israel, have very fond ones. My sister also, you know, she devoted her entire education and her career to supporting the state of Israel. She's now, you know, working for JNF. And prior to me, she also served as president of the Young Leadership FIDF board. And so I have a strong background in philanthropy, you know, from my parents and my community, and I'm so inspired by all of the amazing events and amazing fundraising efforts that our community has put on. But, you know, why do we do this? It's because Israel is really our insurance policy. Without a strong Israel, we as Jews just aren't safe to live a free and Jewish life among the world. So the way that I interpreted that for myself was to support the brave soldiers of the IDF. They, day in and day out, are doing the heavy lifting of keeping the state of Israel safe. And so what do we do as the FIDF? We try to make their jobs as easy as possible through financial support, emotional support, educational support. And beyond that, our investment in these soldiers was really building the future of Israel as well. If you didn't know, I think that there is like the most per capita investment in startups in Israel than in the entire world because of the sheer, what's the word? It's really deep into Yom Kippur and I'm not remembering words anymore. Just the commitment to startups and innovation, it's so ingrained in their training in the IDF, and that's enabled them to be extremely sophisticated and.
If I may, that's because Israel itself as a country is the #1 startup Israel has, and that includes within itself the IDF. Like these are Israel as a country and the IDF. Like you can't get better than these two startups. It's maybe not perfect, but we're working on it. So it's the startup nation.
Great book. Highly recommend. But yeah, I think, as you would know best, in the training for the IDF, you're always taught to innovate with the situation, right?
Right. Like they'll give you situations that are impossible to solve and give you some tools and see how you can come up above because they're training you to become innovators. That's one of the best parts of IDF training, I think.
It's also what you're taught as a leader.
But
Absolutely.
yeah, so circling back, that's what really motivates me, and that was the source of my inspiration, my community, my parents, and just seeing Israel thrive is what keeps, I think, us all going, and creating the community here to help support that in the future.
Terrific. So first of all, I just want to give, shout out sounds rude, but a love out to the parents and the grandparents of these 3 people. And I also want to give a shout out to our Youth House program. All 3 of these individuals were very much involved. So there's one individual whose name was definitely mentioned a lot of times, and we want to acknowledge the leadership of Moshe Pormarati for all the years. We are planning a weekend of celebration for and with Moshe. It's going to take place most likely the first Shabbat in December, so please be on the lookout for that. I also want to give a love out, shout out to the entire Great Neck community, to the Great Neck Public Schools. All 3 of these individuals are products of our outstanding school system. I was going to ask them each, and maybe they'll have an opportunity in the next few moments to just throw out what it is that they're most hopeful for. But we are getting to the end of our time together, and I want to be able to open it up for anybody here who has some questions. Please, I would urge you to frame your question as a question for either one of or all of these individuals. But I do need to say, I do a lot as a rabbi, and I am blessed to serve the needs of this community. One of the things that gives me the most hope is to have had contact with and the opportunity to present to the congregation individuals such as these that absolutely represent a wonderful present and an even better future for our people and for the entire community. So I just want everybody to join me in thanking them. And each of the issues they're discussing, they understand, they are deep, they are complex. Israel is many things. The Jewish people are many things, but with people like the 3 of you who are involved, it certainly fills me with hope that we will be able to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. So we have time for a few questions for our distinguished panel. Who has a question? Let's see if there are any questions first.
Is there a question over there or over there?
Okay, yes, there is a question. Go ahead. So what response would you recommend? Jonah. Thank you, Robin.
So, thank you for your question. At Georgetown, I became president of the student body, and I thought this Thrive trip that was made really for, the top law students, the top business students, foreign service students, would benefit from being available to the entire student body. Because I was president of the graduate school, I said, why not open it up to 10,000 students? And I sent out an email, and within a week, we had hundreds of applications. And within a week, we were also put on blast on social media by the Students for Justice for Palestine. And my response was, I sat down and I had a conversation with them. And I actually think that through conversation, we made a ton of headway. And a lot of those students came up to me afterwards and they're like, we understand you've planned the trip. We respect what you've been doing and how you're looking at the situation. And we wish you the best. Not every student said that, but the trip didn't end up going to the entire student body because immediately when there was this BDS accusation, there was on the other side, oh my God, this is a Jewish president trying to plan a trip to Israel. You better believe there was shouting from the rooftops about anti-Semitism. And when anti-Semitism got involved, when that accusation was made, it heightened to a different level that the university was no longer able to handle the trip because there was these swirling accusations. The ADL was involved, heavy hitters, ICC, Israel for Campus Coalition, coming to the university asking, do we have an anti-Semitism problem at Georgetown? And that's where Georgetown said, whoa, 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 I don't know much about this trip. This is student planned, this is student led. Who's this Jonah?
Oh, man.
And so what I say to that is instead of meeting the accusation with anti-Semitism, try to have a conversation. It won't persuade everybody. There were still people that protested the trip, and you better believe that we faced the consequences of that very loud and clear. But from a conversation, 3/4 of the people in the room really listened and changed their minds.
So I have to say just a timely comment. We will be reading your story, the story of Jonah, shortly this afternoon. And that Jonah tried to run away because he was afraid, and this Jonah did not. So that's very impressive. Rebecca? Loud. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Wow. Yeah, please go online. I mean, you can read the story if you Google his name and Georgetown. It's really remarkable how Jonah was able, with help, to navigate a very complicated campus situation. I will take time for one more question, and then we will wish everybody Chatima Tova. Sir. Can you, as loudly if you can. What would we ask of the group that's in power right now? That's the. What would you ask them? Okay. So what would you ask from the current generation of, shall we say, more established leaders? Is that what you're saying? That would help you to be able to do your work of inspiring the next generation more effectively. What can we do for you, I think is, okay. Yeah. Monica, you comfortable answering that?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think so.
great. Monica, go ahead.
Yeah, I think the way that I interpreted your question is more so like, how can your generation empower the generation below you to be more involved? I think in order to empower anyone, you kind of really have to understand their motivation and, you know, what makes them get up in the morning, right? So, you know, you're asking me a question, but I think what it should be is that you should ask, you know, the people around you, the younger people, how do they feel about Judaism? How do they feel about getting involved? You know, what are some things that they've really enjoyed doing, and what are the things that they get frustrated by? So exactly, you know, what this panel was, I encourage you to ask, you know, the generations below you the same kinds of questions. And then from there, you can make a more informed decision around the type of programming you put on, the types of opportunities you give them to get involved. And I think you'll be surprised with what you find and how you're able to actually really get them so engaged because you're targeting what they've already asked for.
Okay, thank you, Monica. One final order of business. So as I mentioned, all three of these individuals participated in our Youth House program. We are indebted to Moji and to other teachers. Tiona Kamel was mentioned, who have been part of that. Rabbi Schweber and I have the honor of teaching these students on a weekly basis. And we are now bringing on board a new leader of the Youth House. She is extraordinary, wonderful background, and a real sense of what it is that teens need, remarkable creativity, and she is with us. And Lowen, I'm just going to ask you if you could just stand. Lowen Amer just began. And if you yourself are interested, if you have children, if you have grandchildren, just please, she's here, she is accessible. Talk to her, share your ideas, because obviously this is what we're trying to achieve. So thank you to our panelists, and thank you everybody for being with us this afternoon.
Everyone having
Mincha begins at 4:20. Shana Tova, Chatima Tova to everybody.
everyone has an easy rest of your fast. I'll be here for questions for 5 to 10 more minutes.
And the panelists are here to schmooze if you want to come over.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much. What was your name? I'm Jacob. Monica. Nice.
Thank you to Moji Pormarati for setting this up.
I graduated 2010.
Okay, so I graduated 2014. There
Okay,
you
so
go.
I missed you by 4
Just
years.
by a little bit.
Yeah.
Two amazing people.
Hi, Neville Basha.
Did your mommy come?
Yeah, she's sitting in the middle. Hi, how are you?
That was amazing.
I want to make jokes here, but thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I would encourage you and everybody else, this is your first step in getting into the idea,
Yes,
getting into the guts of Israel's existence,
of course.
emotionally very powerful. I would encourage you
Yes,
to start
please.
looking deeper,
Okay,
because the issues that Israel faces are less external,
for sure.
more internal.
Right.
And the questions that you have is protecting the country from itself is now the biggest challenge.
It's very complicated. I know. I'm very involved with Israeli politics. I know the complications. It's a bloodbath. I know. It's not straightforward.
No. It's very complicated.
Very
But
complicated.
you're in it.
Yeah.
And while you're in it, you got your foot in very deeply. You got both feet in. It's very exciting. And congratulations for taking
Thank you.
the steps you did.
Thank you.
Good luck.
I'm proud of you. Hug and a kiss. I'm Monica's mom.
Hi, how are you?
So proud of you.
Thank you.
Actually shaking your hand and then FIDF idea.
FID